Okay, so the next thing is the basic setup. So most of the VPN labs, side-to-side VPNs, I'll be using this setup where we got some router 1, router 2, router 3 and router 4. Now the router 1 will be acting as my hub router, and whereas the router 2, 3, 4, I'm going to use them as spokes. And to simulate the internet connection, I'm connecting to one of the router here, the router 5. So the connection goes through router 5 to all. Now this router 5 is going to simulate my internet connection. So this is the same topology what I'm using in my GNS3. And additionally, I'm using a LAN interface. In every LAN, I'm using 192.168.1 dot subnet here, 192.168.2 dot subnet, 192.168.3 and 192.168.4 dot subnet. So these are like LAN networks where I want to make sure that we do have LAN to LAN communication between these sites. And the IP addresses, what you'll see here, these IPs connecting interfaces. So I'm using 15.00x. This is the public IP what I'm using between R1 to R5. You can see 1 to 5 is 15.1.5, and the last portion is 1 here, and the last portion is 5 here, the exact router number. So similar way, I'm using 25.00x, 35.00x, and 45.00x. So these are the public IPs what I'm using on the router interfaces. So if you try to check my topology, so I do have this topology pre-configured on my GNS3, and if you try to check the images what I'm using this IOL image, this is what I'm using, the 15.4 version. So basically I recommend you to use IOL because the iOS images have some issues with the DMVPN or the VPN configurations. So this is the image what I'm using for this labs. So it's pre-configured with this image. And if I go to the command line and verify the configurations here, I do have these basic IP configurations. So if I say show IP interface brief, on the router 1, this is my Ethernet interface, and this is the interface which is connecting to the WAN. I'm using serial interfaces here, S2/0 on router 1, 2, 3, 4, and additionally the loopback I'm using the future labs. And also, and if you check, and also one more thing, apart from the IP addressing, I also have a default route. Because before you move on with the VPN labs, you need to make sure that this public IP and this public IPs must be reachable. So the reachability in the real scenarios, you will be having some kind of default route towards the service portal, and the service portal will ensure that this reaches the next public IP, that is 25.0.0.2, mostly with the help of some BGP protocol, basically because service port to service portal routing is done with the help of BGP. So I'm not going to make it complex. I'm not using at all BGP here because the router 5 is the common router connecting to this one. So I do have a default routes pointing towards all the routers, which means in order to check the reachability from 15 to 25 between these two public IPs, based on the default route, let's say from the router 1, if I try to ping to the public IP of 25.0.0.2, I do have a default route configured already. So I do have a reachability because based on the default route, the packet reaches the router 5, and the router 5 knows where is 25.0.0.2 because it is a directly connected interface, right? But in the real scenarios, it will be through BGP routing. So I have just configured the default route. So if you check the routing information, if I say show IP route static, I do have a default route configured out of S2/0 on all the routers. So if you check the router 2 as well, I do have the IP addressing as per my topology, and additionally if I verify the routing, I do have a default route configured here. And if you verify the iOS version, I'm using here show version. So I'm using this IOU image. This is the image what I'm using. It's running 15.4 iOS versions. So basically this will be useful for the future labs, like we'll be using Flex VPNs. For the Flex VPNs, it is again mandatory, you must be running 15.iOS versions. So let's confirm the reachability between all the sites so that I can verify to router 3, the public IP, as well as router 4 public IP. So this is the prerequisite you need to always check before you go for the VPN labs. So make sure that you do have reachability between these public IPs. Okay, so basically this is what the lab setup we'll be using for our VPN labs.